So Rob, would you like to introduce our presenters, please?
Okay, I will. Good evening, everybody. I'm Rob, KC6TYD. And gosh, ever since before October, for sure, if you happen to be on N6NFI repeater, you probably heard conversations here and there about some sort of balloon landing, and I'm going to go track it down and blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of like exploded. Actually, the balloon does, and I'll show you here in a minute. But Bo, K6EAU, and Ricky, I can never remember your call sign, sorry, and Steve, K6WW, are now doing a lot of these chasing of these satellite balloons, and they'll give you the whole rundown on what's going on from the beginning to the end. And it's pretty fun. I actually participated. In fact, I have an example up here where I met Bo early in the morning and we were tracking this one down and we found it in Santa Clara. So anyway, without further ado, guys, I'm going to pass it over to you. And when the time comes, I do have a visual display here and I can put my roving camera on it and show everybody on Zoom or whatever visual aids you guys may have. We'll just leave it up to you. You let me know. So whoever wants to take it first, it's all yours. Thank you for coming.
That would be me, but I'm still disabled as far as screen sharing. So I think
Give me a sec, Steve, hang on. Hang on, I gotta find you in the queue here. Give me a sec.
So is Frank leaving since there's no raffle?
All right, you want to try your screen share now?
There we go. I get this toolbar out of the way. You guys seeing this slide?
We are.
All right, that's a good thing. All right, good evening, everybody. My name's Steve Wilson, K6WW, and Bo is online as well. And Ricky, unfortunately, is feeling a little under the weather, so we're not expecting her to join, but she may. I'll just say that, you know, it's all Bo's fault. Like many of you, there was one day that I was listening to N6NFI and just got caught up in all of the all the excitement of Bo chasing down this balloon. And next thing I know, I'm out there with him on a bike going around some water down in Milpitas chasing. And I didn't even know what we were looking for. I didn't know what, you know, I had a rough idea of what it was. And later on, he showed me an example. But I just got caught up with it and got really interested, and it's been kind of a fun diversion. So I thank him for getting me, you know, indirectly roped into this. And yeah, looking forward to sharing this with you all. Basically, all around the world, as you can see by this map, and this is pretty amazing to me because I had no idea, and like many of you probably don't either. But twice a day, exactly at the same time, so at 0 and 1200 UTC, over 900 sites are launching weather balloons. So simultaneously, these are being launched into the air. And essentially, they'll rise for a good 90 minutes, approximately 90 minutes to get to their full altitude, which is somewhere around 110,000 feet or 21 miles, so basically near space, before they burst and basically return back to Earth. And it takes about 30 minutes for them to return. Now, in a minute, we'll go through the pieces and parts of the balloon, but one of the things that we don't have, at least from the balloons that are launched locally here, is we don't have parachutes on our balloons. So those can certainly affect the duration for the flight. And they're used, I haven't really come up with a good rule of thumb as far as where they're used and where they're not worldwide, but certainly from a hunting perspective, that bright orange balloon I can imagine would be quite helpful, especially if you're around snow. The balloons are roughly 5 or 6 feet in diameter when they're launched, and as they go up to the 110,000 foot elevation, they're growing in diameter to a good 20 to 25, even 31 feet in diameter. So they're pretty huge. They're pretty big. Now, each of them are carrying a payload. Now, back in the early days of these weather balloons, the payload was basically in a mail bag and contained information on how to return said payload back to the Weather Service. Well, now these radiosondes, as they're called, roughly about $100 a piece, are deemed basically recyclable and not worth the effort to have them returned. So basically the label on them says harmless weather instrument, discard as you would any other piece of electronics. So there's really no incentive for returning these. Now, there are some, and they're certainly different manufacturers of these and different styles, some of which are, I think, still they want to get back, but the ones that we're dealing with around here in the Bay Area are not. Now, this is a very cool video. This video is going to take you, it's basically, there are a couple of cameras on this balloon as it reaches 110,199 feet and bursts. And there are several repeats with different angles and in slow motion. So I'll just go ahead and play this for you all. It's a little bit slow at the beginning here. It takes a little while, but I mean, just that view alone. And just the other day, I was reading an article about some company that's planning on doing some balloon space tourism, where kind of the similar idea, take you up under a balloon and then take you back down. Anyway, so this thing, I just, the view blows me away, to see the Earth from that standpoint, from a little camera on a balloon. So we're at 109,000 feet. So I'll just kind of let this play out for you. It points out a few places along the way. Look, it's the Statue of Liberty. No, just kidding. So we're just about there. There it is.
Up, boom. The fact that you're up high enough to see the curvature of the Earth is just amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, now it's like, whoa. So it'll, like I said, it'll go through a couple. There we go. Here's another view of it. So this one's 31 feet in diameter. Come on, you can do it. Really. The orange, there's a parachute on this particular one.
How was the parachute deployed, Steve?
It just unfurls with that. It's part of that unit. And again, the ones around here that launch from Oakland don't have the parachute, so I've never seen them. But just watching this video, they just kind of seem to unfurl by themselves. And just the payload, it's a good 100 feet of nylon line that's going down to the payload. All right, so I'm not going to get everybody kind of seasick here and watch this. As far as the parts of the weather balloon, so there's the balloon itself. It can be latex or neoprene. I believe the ones that we're dealing with locally are latex. There's a nozzle there for loading it up with hydrogen or helium. Now, hydrogen tends to be the more popular. The parachute, again, isn't used in our area. And then there's a plastic spool, and I don't have a close-up. Rob may have one attached to that balloon that's there. I've got one here in front of me that I can show later, but there's a plastic spool that then has the 100 feet of nylon, and that just kind of spools out with the payload below it. And the payload below it is called a radiosonde, and it basically has the weather instruments for measuring and then transmitting that data. So measuring various weather information, then transmitting it down to a ground station. So this is the Vaisala radiosonde. It's the RS-41. So this is the payload that's used out of Oakland, and it's probably one of the more frequently used radiosondes across the U.S. To kind of take you through a little bit of a tour here, this area is basically all made of styrofoam. So you've got a couple of LED status lights there. You've got an integrated GPS antenna. You've got this boom that sticks out with the sensors on it. At the very tip there is the platinum temperature sensor. There's a humidity sensor. And then there's an integrated short-range wireless connection to the ground system. And this is what it looks like if we were to crack that thing open. So a couple of AA batteries and then the board. And I'll let Bo talk a little bit more. Frequently asked question that I haven't really investigated quite yet is, well, you know, after you retrieve these, can these be repurposed? Well, yes, they can be repurposed for ham radio balloon activities, and I think there may be some other options as well. So the sensors that are picking up the various data, there's temperature, there's pressure, there's humidity. It's tracking the wind direction using the GPS, the wind speed. And then all of this data that it's gathered is basically being fed into forecast models for all of our local weathercasters as well as the National Weather Service. Now, what makes this kind of the ultimate T-hunt is that there's a transmitter that's transmitting on 400 to 406 megahertz. So when I first started chasing these, and before and we'll talk about the different options that you have as far as chasing these, but I started as a newbie with my HT, basically doing the same thing that I would do on a T-hunt, and basically tuned to the frequency for the transmitter, and then use body fade, right? So we'll talk a little bit about all the different goodies that you can use for tracking these, but that's kind of where the crossover to kind of comparing it to a T-hunt. So there's a couple of different websites. This is the first one, and Bo will take you through a couple of them. This is a website that that circle here that I have the arrow pointing is basically representing the Oakland launch site. And you know, some of you may be thinking, launching balloons right by an airport, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. I believe they do a little bit of coordination, but apparently it's not an issue. So if you go to this website, and it's radiosonde.org, or excuse me, sondahub.org, I'll have the URL up in a minute, and you click on this circle for the site, it'll open up this little window here and tells you when they're being launched. So currently since we're in Pacific Standard Time, it's 3 a.m. and 3 p.m. I will tell you, I can't wait for the time change because it's so much easier dealing with 4 a.m. and 4 p.m. And then of course, tack on 2 hours for them to go through their full, go up to 110,000 feet and come back to Earth. There's the website. It's tracker.sondahub.org. And as you can see with the buttons here, this website, and I believe it's open source, it's pretty cool because you can generate predictions for the next week. So, and I have some examples coming up. And you can also click the historical button there and see all the historical launches. So, Bo, being the animal that he is, and going out and getting things that may have launched like a week or 2 weeks ago, you can go and click on the historical, and it will give you a little icon indicating where they landed. Up in the upper left-hand corner, there's an icon here that allows you to select the different types of maps. And then you can select live only or 1 hour, 3 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours. So filter. Now the transmitter that's transmitting that that signal is only transmitting for 8 hours. So there's what's called a burst timer. So there's this kind of short window of opportunity for you to track whether you're using an HT or a radio or some other kind of device, but because eventually it's going to go silent. And then you've got to pretty much rely on this website to tell you kind of roughly where that balloon landed. So this is the Oakland site. I went out for a couple of days in a row, and due to technical problems the first day with cameras and stuff, I went back. This you see, I believe this looks to me like a telescope actually with the dome here, but it's this section on the left-hand side that is the actual launch, and this is an auto launcher, right? So there are some areas where you've got a person actually launching a balloon. In this case, it's an auto launcher. So this was my GoPro that I mounted on the fence there. So I've got two different views for you, both this distant view and then I've got a close up. So here's the distant view. There it goes. It's funny, someone mentioned the prisoner earlier. It totally brings back memories. And here's a close-up. Now, you'll notice that there really wasn't a whole lot of line there. The payload was maybe, I don't know, a few meters below the balloon. But as the balloon is going up to its maximum elevation, the line with the payload on it, with the radio sonde, is spooling out. And what's really interesting, and again, I believe Rob's got one of these in the room, is I noticed on this is the little plastic spool here. It's kind of interesting when you look closely at it, they didn't make this exactly symmetrical. It's slightly offset. So I think it's designed to kind of go back and forth to help with the unspooling. So, those little details. So this is what it looks like on the SondaHub website when you're generating predictions. And so essentially, depending on what time of the day, let's say I clicked on this button right now, right? Number 1 would be tomorrow morning's launch, and number 2 would be tomorrow afternoon's launch. If we were to click on this at noon, for example, then number 1 would be the next launch, which would be 3 p.m., and number 2 would be the next morning. So for those of us that are hunting these down, and I'll tell you this, the predictions here are amazingly accurate. But this gives you an idea where it's like, okay, do I want to drive out to Livermore, or look, it's going to be in Fremont, which is where I live. So it really does help you plan your week, if you will, to determine whether there's something that's going to be in your hood, that's going to be easy or not. And then, what I'll do is I'll go a little bit further and use some of the wonderful tools of Google Street View, for example, and take a look around and see, are there locked gates that I need to deal with? Bo is really good about contacting owners of properties ahead of time and getting permission and stuff like that. But these predictions are really pretty amazing to give you an idea of what's going to be happening over the next week. So let me go over to my browser, and I was going to go ahead and drive, and Bo, give you an opportunity to kind of narrate here. Does that work for you? I'm hearing a...
Yeah, sure thing. If you want to go through a couple.
I'm sorry?
Is my sound getting through okay?
Yeah, uh-huh.
Cool. So yeah, so there's a couple of main sites. I'll actually show you an older site which first got me into all of this, but what you're looking at is the main tool that we use, SondaHub. And it's a great tool. It's actually financially supported by ARDC and really closely tied to the amateur radio community. They're also using this platform for all amateur launched balloons as well. So that's a new thing rolling out. But if you go to the website, this is the view that you'll start off with. And this has been really popular in a big sport in Europe. So it starts off centered over there. You see in the top left, though, there's a lat long, and that's your location. And if you click on that, it'll snap you to your relevant location. But what you're seeing, all those gray circles are launch sites. They're not all active, but there are nearly 1,000 sites that generate the over 1,000 launches a day of these radiosondes. So in particular, there's a lot of this kind of activity across the US and in parts of Western Europe. And so typically what we'll do, I actually have mine bookmarked so that it basically zooms in on our area. And I live in Hayward, Steve's a bit south towards Fremont. Conveniently, the Oakland airport is one of the sites that launches 2 of these a day at the 3 a.m. and 3 p.m. that was mentioned. So that's the gray circle there. And so if you come onto the site at 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon, you'll start to see a balloon pop out of the airport. And then there's some great features in here that are a little hidden, but fortunately, we're generally really friendly. Those of us chasers is kind of the default that we use, particularly with this site. And a friend of ours who we met through doing this actually tipped me and then tipped Steve to some nifty features. This is something that we use when we're actually out looking, which is when you can use this on your phone as well. And when you enable the chase mode, you can see the blue guy in the map. That's where Steve's location is coming up. And if he turns chase mode on, it'll turn into a car. And so it'll track and update while you're going after a balloon, which is, I've got some interesting screenshots. The other chasers, actually, I think Steve, you might have been in the mix as well. We were all coming from different directions and converging on the same balloon, and you could see us on the map. But if you click on any of the launch locations, you'll see there's a history and prediction capability. So the generate predictions is really cool. It'll show you 14 balloons, which is the next 7 days of launches. What's really great was when you hit this button and they're all aiming for your backyard. For the last couple of months, they've been blowing way east. And over the summer, they were staying much more around the East Bay, the peninsula, and a bit into the North Bay, but they've been going closer and closer to Nevada, and and really bombarding the Central Valley. But what you're seeing is every 12 hours, another balloon prediction. So one is going to be launching at 3 a.m. tomorrow and landing around that area about 5 a.m. And it'll keep transmitting until about 1 in the afternoon when it shuts itself off. And then 2 is going to be the one that launches at 3 in the afternoon. Same thing, it's going to land about 5, and it's going to keep beeping until about 1 in the morning. And I think the devices are rated and tested to last for at least 10 hours. And then I think what they do is they shut themselves off because Oakland pretty much always uses 404 megahertz. And so you don't have multiple balloons interacting with each other. Other locations tend to use another specific frequency. Some sites that launch repeatedly will cycle through various ones. So now you can see this RS-41 SGP, that fuchsia pink balloon with the parachute. Now the colors don't mean anything. They randomly change. But what you're getting from this is the RS-41 signifies that it's a radiosonde Visalia model 41, and the SGP is the type. And that basically means it has the temperature, the humidity, and an extra fancy barometric pressure sensor in it, which is an optional add-on. And we're seeing a bullseye with the gray line there. So over on the left, actually, can you hit the, well, I guess that's taken, but on the left, you can see the last telemetry that was received. So it made it up over 112,000 feet. And then it came down, and the last data was received at 3,375 feet. The green line is pointing towards the tracker that saw it. And so that's basically where the line of sight intersected a hill or something like that. But nonetheless, even though it's a few thousand feet up, that bullseye is probably within 100 feet of where it's sitting right now, because it's able to use the current wind observed and predicted at various elevations. And so obviously you can see the wind as it was coming down from 10,000 feet to 3,000 feet, which at that close to the ground, it's still descending at several thousand feet per minute. But the closer it gets to the ground, typically the lighter the wind is, and the more, or the shorter it travels. And again, these things love power lines. I've yet to find one in the power line, but it's so often that I see this where it's like aiming for the middle of a field, and then it'll be like, nope, I'm going to go straight for the power lines. But yeah, so the data you see on the left, you can see the rate of ascent and descent, the speed over the ground, the max altitude, the time is there, latitude, longitude, the battery voltage, it's 2 AA lithiums, one-time use, and then the burst timer. So what happens is that's an 8.5 hour timer that the balloon knows when it pops, because basically it goes from going 1,000 feet per minute up to around 10,000 feet per minute in the super thin atmosphere straight down. And so it's about a half an hour to get to the ground. So that then leaves about a half an hour or 8 hours on the timer to continue tracking it. Sometimes they'll be damaged, or you won't be able to hear them. So sometimes we just have to rely on guess and telemetry. And then if you see down at the bottom in small print under the RS41 SGP, it says it was received 2 hours and 50 minutes ago. Usually it'll be a second or two when it's live. And then you see WA6AC has a Raspberry Pi and an SDR that's providing this data that's used by Sonde Hub and others. And then one more thing, if you hit the telemetry graph at the bottom, this is really cool, especially while it's flying. So it almost looks like some electrical charts. If you see the light blue line, it's a very linear left to right. That's its ascent from ground level to burst. And it's a near constant 1,000 feet per minute. And then you get a capacitor discharge curve when it bursts. It's going through super thin atmosphere. There's no parachutes on these. It's just the drag of the radiosonde, a couple hundred feet of string, and whatever is left of the balloon remnants. And then you'll see it starts to shallow out as it gets back into the thicker atmosphere. It's also really interesting to look at, the pressure is really, really smooth. But then you look at things like the humidity and the temperature, and you can tell when it's going through a cloud and other things. And it's interesting that it gets really, really, really cold, and then it gets a little bit warmer, and then it gets cold again. Yeah, these things are in -40, -50 C temperatures all the time. And then Steve, since your screen share is working so well here, if you want to zoom out a bit, we can point out the receivers stations, and then can clear the predictions and show what the historical looks like as well. And again, I'm usually only chasing these when they're 5 to maybe 30-minute drive away. They've all been an hour plus for months now. So I'm usually more familiar with the specific areas, but they do cover a really wide area. So you can see here's the tracker. It's actually at Livermore Municipal Airport. And Steve, I think you grabbed the one, or maybe it was Seth, that landed on the fence across the street from the airport.
That was Seth, I think. Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, if you go even wider, maybe from like Reno to the coast. So now you can see those more green dots there. Those are the other tracking stations. And yeah, and then one other thing you'll see there's another balloon coming out of the Farallones Marine Sanctuary area, and still looking to get more information on those. But there's a few sites that I think are related to research stations and weather, and they'll launch those in quick succession several times a day, even a half an hour apart. And I think in particular, they're trying to get data on atmospheric rivers and particular conditions that happen with like the big storm that we just got. And then you'll also see some really interesting launches from the south out of the Vandenberg Space Force operations and base, where rocket launch sites will also use radiosondes to prepare for launches. But yeah, if you want to delete the predictions, and then we can show the historical. But yeah, there's the Space Force base.
I was just
and so
going to add that notice this icon up here in the upper left. This is the icon that's used when the balloon is still whole, and it's basically still rising up to maximum altitude, and then the icon changes to the parachute when it's after it's burst. So I'll delete predictions here. Yep.
Yeah, good point there. And yeah, it doesn't differentiate between balloons that have parachutes and balloons that don't. It just means it's popped or not popped.
Yep.
And then when there's recent recoveries, you'll see just a gray version of the bottom of the balloon there, which indicates that it was logged as recovered or lost. So sometimes you'll see over a few days a cluster in one area. But yeah, if you want to go to historical, and then let's do last month, 2022, December. And you'll see the Central Valley here start to get inundated. So what you're seeing is all the empty white circles there are ones that were tracked and landed, and then the gray circles were ones that were recovered. So Steve, did you get the one near Escalon? So if you click on that gray one there at Escalon.
It's weird. It's not. Why is it not the other one? It's not. It's weird. Oh, there we go.
There you go. Okay. Or try the one down there in Patterson.
There he is.
Oh, that's catching. So yeah, so this was when they first started at Central Valley. I went for one of these. I think I have some pictures to show you on that. But yeah, also these are really helpful, especially when I was getting started. We kind of leave each other notes in these in terms of the prediction versus where we actually found it, or other things that became helpful. Yeah, but if you go back a couple more months to say September, October, then you can see, I mean, these will land.
These guys here.
I've recovered a couple quite close to Cubberley around Palo Alto and San Jose, and yeah, obviously the East Bay. So, and then also a load of them go straight into the bay or the ocean. But yeah, just to give you an idea, like over time, these things literally go everywhere and get pretty well distributed throughout the broader Bay Area.
I didn't see any traces coming down to South County. Bummer.
Yeah, they will. I think I guess it was November. There was a few that came in around San Jose. But they'll be back. I mean, I've chased them from, they'll definitely land anywhere from Monterey to Novato, and from the ocean to Modesto. So they'll get to you eventually if you watch them long enough.
Yep.
Yeah,
I wonder how many come
predominantly
down in
northerly.
Wales.
Sorry, I double with you, David. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I wonder how many come down in Wales near Port Merion. Prisoner reference, sorry.
Yep.
Wonder how often they land in, or come by the drop zone that Rob jumps into. Might have a midair.
Actually, there's a story where Bo was actually finding one about a mile away a few months back.
Yeah, so this is the other website. So this is actually where I got started. I actually discovered the balloons initially from tracking on APRS.FI, because some of the tracking stations will relay the data to APRS. And that's what ultimately led me to this site, which was created by a Polish operator, SQ6KXY. And they also have some Raspberry Pi support and have been doing this for quite some time. So yeah, this works very, very similarly. It's not quite as slick an interface, but I still find it quite useful from time to time, depending on the circumstance. So one of the things so this one's really interesting. It's a little faster because it doesn't quite have as much data bunched up. If you pull this up between 3 and 5 and zoom out, you'll see all these balloons moving basically in real time all around the world, which is quite impressive. And so this pretty much does the same thing. It's a little different, particularly with the predictions, in that it just does one prediction when the balloons launch, and then it doesn't update. Whereas Sondy Hub actually uses the data it gathers while the balloon is flying and progressively updates its projection. So it's pretty consistent. It gets really squiggly in a couple of places, and then as it's on the final descent, it really hones in quite precisely, and is really helpful in that regard. And yeah, if you want to, I don't actually use this one much as of yet. So Steve, if you want to talk through your experience with it.
Yeah, and I don't know that much about it. All I know is it's way cool. And I put in the URLs, the basic URLs in the chat for everybody, and we'll certainly share them afterwards as well. But this website, earth.nullschool.net, allows you to kind of visualize and see the wind patterns, but you also have options to select ocean as well. And I just find this thing totally fascinating. Let's see. But there we go. And certainly with I was looking at this the other day with the storm that we had, and let me get rid of this. But yeah, this is just kind of an example, and you can select various types of modes here. So there's air, ocean. Got particulates, space. Anyway, that's just kind of a cool site. All right. Thanks, Bo, and I'll hand it back to you in just a sec. Ways to track and find the payload. So, using those websites that we just demonstrated and predicting the landing area will definitely help you kind of plan your week, right? And Bo has certainly also been known to go out and do kind of a binge recovery and collect multiples in the same area, right? But using one of the trackers to get an idea of where the balloon landed, or at least as you saw the last known location. Then certainly use an HT that you have tuned to the radio sound frequency to track the transmitter signal. So much like a T-Hunt, right? And then using body fade or maybe a handheld Yagi antenna to help with directionality and kind of chase it down. And again, as Bo mentioned, you have an 8-hour window there, right? So, that's one of the challenges, at least for me, if I'm teaching, if I'm available in the afternoon or to try and get away. What we both have done at times is, if it's not too far away, what we've done, and I think you've done this too, Bo, is, go out and take this other device that I'm going to talk about in a minute and find the exact location and get the exact latitude and longitude and have that information and then go back later, right? To take advantage of that little 8-hour window. So that's where this My Sondi Go comes into play. And this thing, Seth, who Bo and I met while we were tracking, Seth used to refer to this as cheating as opposed to doing body fade and whatnot. But this device is actually picking up the information from the payload, so from the radio sonde, and decoding the GPS signal and displaying the actual latitude and longitude for the current location. So whereas the Sonda Hub may be telling you where it was last tracked, if you're within, in the area of the balloon and it's within that 8-hour window, then this little device is going to actually, there it is. It has an Android app that goes with it. I don't think it has iOS yet, but an Android app that mates via Bluetooth. And it's just the bomb. I mean, it's crazy accurate. And so essentially what you can do is walk right up to the radio sonde if it's still transmitting. So I'm going to just tell a quick story about my first recovery, and then I'm going to hand it over to Bo to share some stories. So it was an evening in October of last year. There was a full moon, and it landed on a ranch just off of 680 in Fremont. And Bo was kind enough to reach the owners of the ranch and find out that their front gate was basically unlocked, and we were able to go through and give us permission to go on their property, right? And I forgot what happened, what was going on with you, Bo. I think you just had something else going on, or you were just being kind and throwing me a bone, or maybe a combination of the two. But basically, full moon, landed on this private ranch. I felt comfortable and confident. And let me pause here. The one thing that we really, really are very, very hypersensitive about is, private property and other people's property. And so we're very, very good about either calling ahead if we can find information online, or making contact with a homeowner and whatnot. And the cool thing is, and actually what I've done is I've made some business cards and some other handout postcards with FAQs and whatnot. And these homeowners just really get into it. They're really curious and they want to learn more about it. So I haven't, I've had really good luck. I mean, I had a rancher out in Modesto basically, hey, come on my 4x4 and I'll take you up and down my orchard and we'll find it. And when we found it, I think he was more excited than I was. So anyway, so I'm trouncing around this ranch in full moonlight, right? And I've got all these cows that are staring at me. And, I'm doing body fade. This was before I got the mice on to go. And of course, it's October, right? Halloween's coming up. Well, I got totally faked out by this. I got all excited. I see this white thing hanging from a limb in the distance. And as I got closer and closer, I realized it was this ghost that someone had fashioned. I felt like I was looking around for, cameras, like I was being on candid camera or being punked or something. So I'm standing there in the dark hunting for this balloon, and I just start laughing hysterically just because I thought it was such a hilarious scene, if you will, right? But then off to the right, about 30, 40 feet, I finally found the payload hanging there in a tree. And I was pretty excited about it. Now, what we normally do is try to reel in the balloon, but in this case, the balloon was totally caught up in the tree. So I just had to kind of cut the nylon line and take the unit with me and be done. But we really try to be good about, cleaning up as much as possible. And Bo had a great tip, which is carry some dog poop bags with you, because the latex, depending on how much is left over from the balloon, it just stinks. Anyway, so that was my first recovery. So I was pretty excited about that. So I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to Bo and let him share a story or two with you all.
All right, thanks, Steve. And yeah, if one of the hosts can co-host or whatever me as well, I'll do a screen share here in a minute. And yeah, thank you, Steve. It's been great having you along for the chases. And I know it was a bit of a curse and a love there when we got started and you were getting dialed in. But what I thought I'd do is kind of give a rundown of a few different chases. Just kind of waiting for screens hopping around somewhere there. And okay, it looks like screen sharing's enabled for me. So let me go ahead and turn this on. And yeah, so if I can actually check in with the room real quick, just want to see how we're doing on time, because I can adjust this bit a good bit.
We also had a couple of questions in the room as well. So is this a good time to pause for a few questions?
Yeah, let me kind of bounce through this real quick, and then we'll do some questions, because this is kind of, I guess this is kind of coming along for the ride with me. If folks have been listening to the repeater at all, then they've certainly heard some of these stories. So does everybody see a house sharing? Is that working right?
No.
It's still starting. It says that it started, but it hasn't displayed anything yet.
Okay, looks like unfortunately I had to switch machines here at the last minute, and this one is not the spryest, but my screen changed. Is it working any better now? Oh,
blank screen with
No,
Bo
we're
has
just
started
seeing a
screen
black
sharing.
screen.
Okay, let me do a different mode. I'll do a window share instead of a full screen as soon as Zoom comes back to me here.
Yep, no change so far. I think Bo move because you look like you're frozen. Nope, yeah, I thought so. All right, well, why don't we take some questions?
I tell you what, Steve, let me take this opportunity to maybe show what we've got here, and I can do a live demonstration of
All right.
what the payload looks like, and I'll do
Yeah.
a demonstration of turning the Sonde on and doing it on my Go track.
Okay.
So let me grab my gear. Hang on one moment.
And thanks, Rick, for the response in the chat as far as defining body fade. I'm trying to remember if it's elk or arrow. I think maybe it's arrow antenna. Arrow antenna is producing a small loop antenna designed for T-hunting. I'm kind of intrigued. It's kind of pricey.
Go ahead and get me centered on that camera first. That's fine. She's just trying to arrange that. She's going to adjust that shot here real quick. Just so it's, there you go. Oh, you're going to do it by hand? Oh, I see what you're doing. Got it. Perfect. Okay, so let me bring you up to speed. As I mentioned earlier, I caught up with Bo one morning, and this particular balloon I'm going to show you was predicted. It was a morning launch. I met up with him in Santa Clara, just off of Trimble and De La Cruz area, and there's that little industrial area. And I didn't know he was showing up to do the chase, and he probably didn't know I was showing up. But all of a sudden, we're circling around where we saw the prediction, and lo and behold, there's Bo and there's me. And he has the Sonde Go, which I have now. So he had a good lat long. I was just going off the prediction. And but Bo's got the eagle eye, man. He's been doing this longer than I did. And we walked like 20 foot and he goes, oh, it's right there behind the dumpster. So this balloon, the balloon was actually, this is one that was intact, so to speak. You'll see why. And and it was still connected by the string. So we carefully did some fishing, or at least Bo did, and pulled the string, and then because the actual the payload was still up on the roof. And so as soon as there was a little resistance, pulled and down it came. So these are the three parts. Here is the balloon, and as you saw in the video, boom. It still when I picked this up, some of this was still attached. I think this stuff starts to degrade over time. It starts to come apart even more and more as time goes by. And you can just see what a mess it turns into when it blows. Here is the spool that Steve was talking about. But right now, when Bo had wound up the whole twine around the transmitter itself. And of course, this is the picture that you saw. This right here is where it connects with the string. This is the antenna. And down here is other telemetry items of sorts. Okay, so what we'll do now is this. I'm going to switch over to my cam now, so you can switch over to this one.
I'll say that's a lot more latex than I usually see.
Yeah, it is a lot. Okay, are we on the roving camera here? Okay, so for everybody that was on Zoom can see this, I'll zoom in. Here's the transmitter, and then here's the big mess of balloon. There's the spool. I'm trying to do this all with one hand. Okay, so here is the Sonde Go. I finally have one. I don't have the 3D nice little case yet. So what we're going to do here is this. Stand by. Sure, let's do that. Just point it in this direction. There we go. It's so nice to have another hand. You can just verify there. I'm going to plug this Sonde Go in this battery bank. There we go. So now if you zoom in here on that. Oh, hang on a second. I've got to wait till my camera connects with your, or my Wi-Fi connects up. Let me see if I can get it to go here. Hang on a second. It kicks in. Stand by. There we go. Now point to that. Oh, it turned off. Why did it do that? Hang on a second.
I'll say the mice on Go is rechargeable, which is quite convenient.
Yeah, you have the little battery connected to yours. I'm just using a bank. So this little board, that's all it is. And you can see if you get real, can you get a little closer? Just can you get right up on that? No, it's yeah, if you hit the speaker mode, it would go full screen on speaker. Oh, yep, I'll get that. No problem. Yeah. There we go.
There you go.
So I think the camera speed is causing a lot of little, oh, for some reason that's timing out on me. So I'm not sure what's going on there. And there goes my great video camera here. Oh, there we go. Anyway, let me see if this will hold power long enough that I can do this illustration. What I'm going to do first is turn the sonde on. Has a blinking light. Well, I just have to plug it back. Oh, it's already on. It's already on. But what? Yeah, that was the power button. So let me turn my radio on. My HT, that is. That's the beacon right there. FM, I guess. Yeah. Okay, let's see if I can now hold this. For some reason, it's not staying on. I'm not sure why, but let me see if I can get this. And you'll see the lat long on here. Assuming it's picking it up. I actually was able to get this in the house. Oh, for some reason, it's timing out. Okay, I'm not sure why it's doing that. It might be the battery pink. This is the first time I experimented with that. So anyway, what you would see on there would be the lat long. That's all. Pretty much you guys can grab that. But anyway, so that's just to kind of put everything in perspective, the balloon, the string, the payload, and then using a little device here to track it down. So thank you, Connie. And what we can do now is if you guys are ready, we'll go ahead and bring you guys back up and you can do some Q&A here.
All right. Let me see. Is the screen sharing working any better this time?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'll go through a couple of these and then we'll maybe take some questions along the way or figure it out. But yeah, I just kind of want to show you guys kind of like what Rob's talking about. This was actually just up the street from Coverly one morning in late October. So I've been tracking and wasn't exactly sure where it was, but had kind of DF to it with the body fade and whatnot. And then as I'm walking by this house, you see there's a thin white line there, and that is the string of it. And so there's a very faint one going up this way into the tree, and then another one dropping down here. So I think I kind of want to bring some of these up because this is a lot of the experience in that it varies a good deal in terms of sometimes they're out in the woods and there's nobody around for miles, and sometimes it's literally in someone's backyard. And this was funny because it was, the week before Halloween as well, and there's this string coming up off the roof. And then it was kind of funny because I could kind of jiggle the string, and what looked kind of like another one of Steve's ghosts was there on the other end. But very friendly folks. I just said, hey, I'm an amateur radio operator and tracking weather balloons, and they were more than happy to come out and help me find it. So that basically, this one had a fair bit of balloon with it, and the radio sawn, it's all in one piece, wasn't damaged. And then also you'll see it's partly obscured here, but this one ends in 40754. And that's the magic number that we're using on the trackers. This was, I guess this was actually, what we got here? Okay, yeah, this is now in November, and this is southeast of San Jose. So this is actually, that's Coyote Lake in the background, and I'm right next to the dam. And so when when we get into this, it's like it's really fun to go and we're in radio, and Ricky and I were doing some fox hunting and got to use some Yagi antennas, and so because I was getting close to the timeout timer and I wasn't exactly sure where this thing was, I always try to get a final position when I can. And so I was, half mile away or so, but I was able to get that lat long that's then written on my hand. So I don't actually know exactly where that is, and I'm still actually trying to find it, just using the HT and doing some bicycle mobile operations. And so I also use a technique that I like to call the wet finger, which is basically when I'm getting a really clear signal and I can hear it almost without the antenna, then I can tell I'm getting really close to it when it goes from just being able to tap the top of the H2 with a wet finger to a dry finger is kind of the sweet spot where I know I'm really in eyeball range. But this is what you'll see out in the field. This was conveniently in an open park, not too far from the trail. So this is how it is. So typically what happens is the radio sawn lands first, and then just downwind, the rest of the balloon will land. So that's what we're looking for when we're out there wandering around. And yeah, the very, very convenient, harmless weather instrument, well emblazoned on the devices. And then this was a lot of fun about getting out there. I mean, I really enjoy this as a hobby and a bit of a sport, is I get to see all different parts of the bay. And this is actually on that dam. I got buzzed by a couple of helicopters, including a couple of marine birds, like right on the deck. I think this is just happens to be a really easy nav waypoint. But I had a little QRP radio rig and just kind of set up out of the bag there, since I was up there. And these balloons tend to go to really interesting areas. This again is out not far from you guys. This is actually Menlo Park, looking out about 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning now. And I was tracking a balloon and I was waiting for the park next door to open. So this was an interesting one because it was a mix of easy to get and not so easy to get. What I'm looking for is actually somewhere out here. And unfortunately, there was significant waterways, but actually did a couple mile walk around the other direction, was able to get about a quarter mile away from it. But I think I was actually looking for something here, and I was hoping it was going to be one of Rob's days off, and I could loop him into buzzing out there. I think this is a radio sawn, and this is a balloon. Here I'm using my phone with binoculars to try to get a better view. That might still be sitting there. Here's latitude, longitude, coordinate information if anybody wants to grab a kayak and possibly join a long overdue hunt. Here's a close-up of the radio sawn in action. And then this was a really fun one. This happened to be an every other Thursday morning that I actually do net control. And so I was actually out here hiking next to the Lick Observatory doing net control, pedestrian mobile, and tracking. This is the furthest I've hiked out for something. It was several miles and several hours in and then back. So I took the opportunity to get a final position just in case, but kept DFing to it. Had a great tape measure Yagi antenna that Ricky K and 6KZF and I and others, including Connie. Oh, look at that. speak of, there's a Ricky joining us on the side here. So this is actually helpful. Turns out this is tuned for VHF, so it's not super helpful for balloon hunting at 404 megahertz, but it was great to get in from the backside of the hill to hit the repeater while I was winding up the net. And then this bugger was about 30 feet up in the air on some tree limbs. And none of it came down to the ground. So I had to get pretty creative, and I bring a 20-foot extendable pole, as you can see here, and it was about 5-10 feet short of what I needed. And then also I managed to pull the bottom off when I snagged the top of it. So I turned my modified 25-foot pole into a 15-foot pole, and I could no longer reach the pole or the radio son. So that turned into a totally ridiculous exercise of throwing rocks and kicking myself and wondering if I'm leaving more than I came to get. But after much persistence and duct taping and stringing branches and things together, I recovered the pole and the radio sonde, and had a beautiful hike back with some interesting wildlife in the middle of the trail. And then this one was just east of San Jose, and this was actually a month old, but I had a pretty good idea of where it was, and it was presumably somewhere up in this hill. And this is where doing recon in advance, and I had a general idea that there might be somebody here. I was actually greeted with this: private property, no entry, gates, blah, 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 blah. But I was able to make a contact on site here, and they were super happy to have me jump in their truck and go 4x4ing up this freshly rained hill. And we snagged the balloon there. This is a close up of sometimes just what's left. And then this is one of the last ones here. More recently, instead of going to the Central Valley, one of them was heading for Aptos, and it was predicted to land in this vineyard. Beware dog, warning, video surveillance in progress, first alert, yada, yada, yada. And I was DFing, and I could pick up a really strong signal without the antenna, so I knew I was close. Well, luckily enough, I looked across the other side of the street, and there wasn't a fence or any signs. And there was a radio sonde and a balloon draped over this little tree. So that turned into a totally feasible recovery. And yeah, here's the balloon right there. And then fun surprise, the road I turned off of had this self-service farm stand, and ended up loading up on a bunch of groceries on my way home. This is the one that Rob was just showing. Rob, yeah, I have to get that video from you. So this is what we spotted. This was 6 a.m, totally dark, right at the north end of the San Jose airport. And then the string is actually going straight up here on top of this roof. And luckily we were able to fish it out. This is that one that I got in Central Valley. This was a fun one. Again, really fun greeting of there's no way you're getting in here. And don't even try to do anything. But, you know, I worked the phones, made contact, had my choices of locks to not need to pick, and ultimately had dispatch send me a super friendly SF commission person to unlock the gate and let me roam wild with the cows. And that turned into a nice hike up this hill, and another little recovery, and another piece of rubber and electronics pulled out of the woods. So yeah, that's just kind of a ride along of what I get up to. And whenever I'm in range, we'll be yakking about on the N6 NFI repeater. And waiting for my computer to catch back up here, turn my video back on. Okay, I think some of the audio and stuff lost in there, but yeah, that was a handful of coming up on 60 something recoveries. Ricky being along with me for 4 in a day back a few weeks ago, and hopefully many more. And yeah, I don't know. It looks like you got the Coverly spotlight on the video.
Yeah, we're trying to get back to the regular screen there.
Yeah. But Sally has some questions in the queue, so let them pop up. And I've been talking here for minutes. So Steve, maybe you want to take the first and we can chime in as helpful.
Okay, while we're fixing that, we do have a few questions in Coverly. We'll take those first, and then once we get the screen working here where we can see everybody's hand raising icon, we'll go over there. I must say though that chasers for these radiosondes are actually good stewards, because if I did my math right, 1,070 payloads just for Oakland a year alone that are littering all over the Bay Area.
Yeah, and that one I was just showing, so there's a quarry across the street that actually had great luck getting a hold of plant manager and VIP access to go traipsing around and recover one. That was months ago. This was literally across the street in the Hetch Hetchy watershed. And it took several days and a lot of persistence to jump through the bureaucracy, but ultimately was able to get permission and gates opened and able to, pull these things out. But yeah, there's loads out there. But like as Steve said, we really do want to be good stewards, and I think especially as amateur radio operators, we want to set a good example. And I'm often APRS tracking aside from talking on the radio, but really do hope to have fun with it, but also give back in being able to reuse these things. But first and foremost, being able to get trash out of the wilderness and people's yards.
Okay. All right. I think Miko had a question, then Joe had one, and then Connie. Let's go in that order real quick.
All right. I have three. I've been making a list here along the way. Starting with the easy stuff. I think I saw when we saw a picture of the guts of the Sandy. I think I saw a pair of those nice lithium AA batteries in there. Is that what they're using? And if it is, typically when you do recover a Sandy, are those batteries still useful? Is there any juice left? Because those are super expensive batteries.
Yeah. If you can spotlight us again, Ricky, you want to mention? Or?
Yeah, that we bought new AA batteries in God knows how many months at this point, because Bo keeps just walking out there and picking them up. So yeah, there's definitely still juice left in a lot of them when they're recovered.
So let me see if I can get this to refocus here. Yeah. So these are the actual batteries. They're identical to what you can get for like $8 at the hardware store. AA Energizer lithium batteries. And so these will start off about 1.7 volts. And then when I find them, they'll usually be anywhere from 1.4 to 1.6. They rebound a bit, but because the discharge curve is so flat on these, I think it's misleading. But when I got my first radiosondes, I had no idea what the hardware was and what I could do with them. And it was, we have, so here's, oh, yeah, that's exactly how that was supposed to go.
That's on purpose.
Yeah, figuring out how to open these was a bit of a trick, but here's where the two batteries are. So I used to like brute force these things and just pop the batteries out, and I called that a huge success because they work in Xbox controllers just great. And I feel like it gives me a competitive edge in that I'm playing with batteries that nearly went to space. But yeah.
Bo, could you hold that back up? We've enlarged the display. Okay, back up a little bit so the camera back up so the camera focuses. You're too close.
It'll focus. I just gotta block it out.
There
here.
you go.
Come on, it'll do it. So yeah, so here's the inside of the device. So this is the bit coming up. This is just the temperature sensor. It's not part of the GPS or the transmitter, but apparently it is part of the tuning as a bit of a counterpoise. This is actually the antenna. And then, yeah, here's the batteries. That's the main processor, the STM under there. And then on the back is the U-Block's GPS module. thermally isolated temp sensors. And then this coil here is RFID. So the robot that launches it can be programmed. There's a 10-pin pinout here. It's undocumented, but you can reflash, reprogram the main processor with that, as well as it's a serial interface. And then on the back, there's a board-to-board connector. Need a bigger sheet, but anyways, so yeah, on the back side here, there's a board-to-board connector, and that's what holds this module. And this is just a really fancy barometric pressure sensor. NOAA can pretty much get everything that they want without it, but some locations do fly with them, and it actually has its own microcontroller, same one as the main board. These are extremely well documented. If you just search RS-41, you'll find the alternative firmwares, really good teardowns, and a lot of technical information. So yeah, long and short, the batteries are super reusable. I've gotten hours and hours and hours of gaming out of them, and since they're lithium, they really don't have an idle discharge, and are great backup batteries. So, what other questions do we have?
Nico said he had 3.
Oh, I thought there were 3. I didn't know they were all from Nico.
Oh, maybe not. I think so.
Anybody? Did I lose my audio? I think I could hear if someone was talking.
Maybe we did lose the audio. Did
Test,
someone else
test.
say something?
Yeah, well, I can see we're hear us. Questions?
Did we lose?
Sorry, everybody. The Wi-Fi at Cubberley timed out. We're trying to get them back in. Give me a sec.
Gotcha.
Don't you love technology?
So
Yes.
who's on Zoom that has questions? Because I guess I'm gonna have to repeat a bunch of that for folks in the room. But if anybody wants to throw it in chat or just jump in while
Sure, Bo. Could I ask how long you've been doing this and how did you get started or what made you interested?
Yeah, well, so Quartz Fest is the
Hey, Bo, can you hear me?
yeah.
Okay, our great Wi-Fi here timed us out again as normal. So right when you probably saw us go frozen, you can continue from there. And then Doug will probably need to make Connie host again when you get a chance. Otherwise, take it again, Bo.
Okay, yeah, I'll jump back there in just a second. If I didn't break things. Okay, sorry if I'm dropping out on audio here. It's just a little slow for my computer to catch up. But yeah, I'll come back to the battery question in just a minute. I was just queuing up a question from Zoom, which is how long have I been doing this and what got me started? And that's where the radiosonde.info website comes in, and note it's radiosonde with a Y instead of an E at the end. But basically, Quartz Fest, I've been wanting to go for years, and kind of following it from afar, as apparently I'm going to do again this year. But they were launching balloons every day down there, so I started following those, and they kept going. So I was tracking balloons on APRS-FI, and then I started seeing balloons flying over Hayward. And that turned out to be one of the weather balloons, which then I tracked back to Oakland. And so here's the nice thing is I started on Radiosonde, but it shares its info with Sonde Hub, and Sonde Hub shares its info with Radiosonde. So these are balloons that I was tracking and logging on Radiosonde. And so it took me like a month of chasing just to even figure out how to chase them and get close. But here I can see in March is when I found my first one, and it was in Five Canyons, which is in Castro Valley. And that was a very dewy morning with flip-flops and goats that I eventually found and powered my Xbox back up. And then it wasn't until June that I managed to catch another one. which one of the other chasers I was mentioning had actually beat us, or we all more or less got there at the same time. But I think they had grabbed it, and then we caught up and found it. And then I got one in September, and also this is weather patterns. So in September, a whole bunch started landing in the general area. So here's ones that I was catching in September. There's a week or two where they were kind of coming fast and furious. And at this point, I kind of had gotten dialed in to like how to do it. And this is all through DFing. At this point, I didn't even know about Sondy Hub or my Sondy devices. And then up to more recently, here's the one that I was showing that was in the watershed, and it was 30 feet from where the telemetry had last happened. It actually landed on a hill that was facing one of the tracking sites that was miles and miles and miles away, but had really good telemetry, nearly spot on to the ground. So at this point, I've really seen a little bit of everything. So let me. Where can the room tell me where you guys lost me on the batteries?
I don't actually remember, but you can recap.
Okay. Yeah, but so we're talking about these, and they're the off the shelf. You can get them in the hardware store. They're pretty pricey, AA lithiums, but they're typically 1.4 to 1.6 volts when I grab them, and they're actually warm. So this is what's inside, and this whole thing is warm to the touch, which is by design to keep it from condensating all the moisture that it's flying through. And so the battery voltage will bump back up, and they've got a lot of kick for hours and hours and hours of game playing and doing other things. But as I was showing on here, on the back, this is a 2 millimeter 2x5 header that's for different accessories. I'm just trying to trip my autofocus. We'll actually focus this close if I can get it to bump. But nonetheless, under here is the STM32 microcontroller. This is a RFID coil for programming when it launches. This is the on-off tack button. This is the transmitting wire. This is the temperature sensor, humidity sensor with its own heater. This is part of the counterpoise of the antenna balancing. And then the GPS is actually this tiny chip on the top of the board, and this is the GPS module with more sensors that are thermally isolated. And
Hey,
this
Bo,
is a daughter board.
can you just hold it up and hold it still briefly?
Yeah,
'Cause the video seems to not be able to follow.
Yeah, actually, I can do that. Let me actually, I need lighting here.
Hold the phone.
Well, I'm thinking actually, can you just do a green
Yeah,
screen for me?
mainly you just need to hold it still and not shake it around.
Yeah, it's just, well, I'm just trying to get it because it doesn't focus on the room background, but yeah, it's not focusing much better, but it should be a little sharper.
Turn it around.
Yeah, there we go. So yeah, so there's the battery holders. There's the main microprocessor in the middle there. That's the on-off tack switch, RFID coil, and then you can see there's a cutout and a bunch. There's tons of via stitching on the board, and then on the back side, you can see here's the U-Blox GPS receiver. This is the GPS antenna. And then this is auxiliary. Yeah.
Can you just sort of center it and hold it still and maybe
Sure.
back about 2 inches? And I think we're going to get better focus.
Well, here's, should we, Ricky's.
Yeah,
got
don't worry about the
No, we're
background. You
good.
just need to hold it up and hold it.
Suggestion
still.
here.
The focus was actually okay, actually. Not a problem.
Oops. Need more weight. Yeah, the problem is it's a little dim right here, so I don't think it's focusing quite right. There we go.
Looks good.
Almost got it, but yeah, there's loads of really good pictures online. If you just search for RS-41, and there's really good documentation and teardowns, and actually kind of like layer by layer deconstruction of these things. I think what they did is they actually put it on a photo scanner bed and sanded it down layer by layer. And yeah, those, I mean,
I just put a link in the chat to a site that's got the top and the bottom and numbered pieces and stuff. That'll help.
And if you guys are ready, I'll open it up again for some questions we had here still pending. Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
Okay, let's go over to Joe. Joe, you still had a question? Hang on a second. Let me get you mic'd up so they can hear us in Zoom land.
Like they can't hear me. Anyway, that little radio thing you got up there, does that decode the telemetry, and is that why it knows its latitude and longitude?
I believe it only is getting the lat long. Bo, you can correct me on that.
Yeah, it's actually, the device itself has a little tiny onboard OLED screen that only shows the lat long, but when you hook it up to the Android app, you also get altitude and the kill timer when it gets triggered. So that's super helpful. I've actually done some other experiments and things where you use a Raspberry Pi and an SDR and have been able to actually get and partially decode the raw telemetry. But the big difference is that, yeah, being able to decode it directly from the balloon is super helpful, especially when you're close and it's active. And you can get all the data that you're seeing and then some in the Sonde hub. So you get very precise latitude, longitude, elevation, pressure, battery voltage, model, serial number, the timeout timer, and a bunch of other random little bits of data.
Okay, but I wonder if Joe, his question might have been more specific. We're not getting any weather information on that telemetry, right?
Well, we're getting all the data that NOAA is using to generate their weather information. So it's you're getting, there's a few different, there's basically temperature, pressure, humidity, and then derived wind based on the GPS telemetry.
Right, but the Android isn't interpreting that for us, only other telemetry, right?
That's right. It's just reading the data. It's not making any predictions or doing any actual modeling.
Okay. Yeah. Right. And on the Android tracking app, it will actually, it looks like a Google page, and you're actually following it like on a Google Earth page.
Yeah. I'll try my luck here one more time.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Yeah, so here's a screenshot of a track in action. So at the bottom, seeing the frequency that I'm locked into, I'm getting a strength reading, altitude timer, and then at the top, it's actually showing my latitude and longitude, but it's giving me a pinpoint, and I can see it overlaid in real time on satellite or street map view.
I recognize that as the Fremont dump site we were trying to get. Yeah, the question was, Bo, was it coming from a third party or from that device? But it's actually coming from the device, the Sonde, right?
Yeah, and it's great because so what it is it's a really common chip that I've been hacking on for years, called an Espressif ESP32, which is a 240 megahertz multi-core processor that's about yay big and easily battery powered, and is in the device that you have. It also has a 433 megahertz LoRa module, which by manipulating the firmware can be tuned into the meteorological band for receive from 400 to 406 megahertz. Past that data, the ESP32, which can then decode it and extract the telemetry directly. And it's wild because I'll leave it running in my window here in the kitchen. We're about 300 feet up in Hayward, and I'll get it from just above the Oakland launch site to all the way across the bay and 20 miles up, and can just, that little thing that you have, it's actually the exact same model, part of the same batch and same shipment. And that does all the greatness. All of the data that we're seeing is actually coming from mostly Raspberry Pis with SDRs running software. And then I don't actually know what NOAA is using, but the real derived weather data, I'm sure, has a mainframe behind it somewhere from forever ago.
Okay. We have another question here at Coverly. And if everybody on Zoom can remember to mute, because we're getting some QRM.
All right. Everybody stay right there.
So when you push that button and it activates the little red LED on there, does it just run for 8 more hours after you do that? And does the heater run for all the time, or just during the 8-hour period?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I still have a few secrets to extract. Yeah, I guess I could fire one up and find out. I think, I'm not sure if, because I've had them where they've timed out and I just hit the button and it turns back on again. So I think it resets or it just ignores it when it's fired up again. But it doesn't brick it in any particular way. The one thing that's annoying is they do set the read bit on the firmware, so you can't dump anything that's actually in there, but you can erase the flash, and then that unsets the read-only bit, and you can reflash it, and then make it function however you want, including on the VHF amateur band.
All right, let's get some questions off of Zoom here that they might have been patiently waiting. So Connie, if we can go back to gallery screen when you get a chance, and we can see if anybody has any little hands up icon.
Or fire it in the chat. I don't see any hands popping up, but I just dropped a link in to what I'm going to start sharing here. So my audio might cut again for a moment while the computer catches up.
There we go. Okay. While we're trying to get the main gallery tab up, someone in Zoom, if you have a question, just go ahead and shout out and I'll grab you.
Not hearing anything yet, and didn't see anything in the chat. But yeah, here's, well, okay, there's a overly detailed view here. Figure out how to zoom out here in just a second.
Any other questions? Just shout out from Zoom and we'll answer those. Okay, I do have one story you guys haven't brought up, and then we can probably end this here so we can move on a little bit. But one thing that was discovered, and Bo, you were witness to this as well as Steve, is on that one picture you had of that particular chase we were doing out in the Baylands of Fremont there. And I forget the gentleman's call sign and name, but he was in Campbell and he was looking up in the sky with the naked eye, and he claims he saw the balloon. And I'm thinking, okay, that's really up there. And I know when I skydive and I look up, I can't see a skydiver that's even 2 miles up. But what it turned out to be is a Polaris. I think that's the right word. the sun was at the right angle that the balloon was lit up. And then Bo can reiterate, because he was in Mountain View and he looked up and he had a whole people go, there it is. It was lit up from the sun. And then they all noticed that it had disappeared suddenly. And then we looked on the app and we noticed that it was descending. So they actually witnessed when it popped. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. That was Jim KN6UOO, and they're really into astronomy, so they're quite conveniently adept at spotting tiny things in the sky. And yeah, I really didn't believe it when we were trying to figure out what was really going on there. But given that we were talking to each other on the radio while tracking the telemetry, and sure enough, right when it was popping, as he put it, it winked out of existence. And then the next day I was in Mountain View, and there was a very similar path, and he saw it, and I went outside, and I didn't see anything. And then there it was. It was really, really hard to miss. Much bigger than a star or a planet. And the sun was low enough, and the sky was dark enough that there was a good bit of contrast. And I had half a dozen other people come out and stare up, and I pointed at it, and they all saw it as well. And then in an instant, it was gone. And I was listening to it on the radio and tracking it. And yeah, sure enough, it disappeared right when it started falling.
All right.
20 miles up.
Yeah, that's pretty high. I got a question here from Coverly. Stand by.
Yes, I was wondering, you probably track some of this information, possibly not, but I was wondering the average amount of time per, shall we say, collection activity. And also the other two items I had question about was the average amount of expense involved, what with fuel and food and other things like that. And then so it would be expenditure of time, expenditure of just expenses, and then just wondering if you had tracked those kinds of things.
The love of the hobby, probably.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, so yes, I've tracked a lot of this stuff in detail. I have not crunched the numbers, but I've had many, including my first one. Sorry, computer's thinking really hard. Just want to make sure it's not dropping out. The scans that I linked are 50+ megabyte images. So you can zoom in total clarity for days when folks feel like it. And but yeah, the most of the ones that I've recovered and had good chases have been in the East Bay, or not more than a half an hour drive. So typically round trip, it's only a few dollars in gas. And my number one tool in the kit is a big old jug of water and/or Camel Pack and a bag of trail mix, or frozen plums when I'm lucky. So, I think like the one I got in the Central Valley, that was $5 to $10 in gas round trip. But for me, just, the adventure of it, but also, the batteries basically cover the gas, and the whole thing would cost me well over $100 to try to recreate. I'd say the actual value of reusability makes it maybe $10 to $50, but the number one biggest thing that I've gotten out of this through the better part of this year is I've actually gotten in much better shape and lost a pretty incredible amount of weight by going out and being able to do things like I've hiked all the way up Mission Peak from the base to the 3,000-foot peak where all the broadcast towers are to get one radio sonde. And so, yeah, the value of health, conditioning, experience, fun, and time outdoors has by and far surpassed the amount of gas, insurance, tire rubber, and otherwise.
Well, and to put things into perspective, Bo drives a hybrid, whereas for me, it's been a little bit more expensive. And I'll say that some of the lessons have been a little expensive. You know, it's like I'll drive out to the Central Valley and realize once I get there that there's a lock gate that I didn't quite anticipate or things like that. So the one thing that I have to say, and Bo, maybe you can echo this, but my wife has heard me, you know, it's like with every recovery, with every, attempt, there's been a lesson learned, right? So it's been an interesting learning experience. And part of that is kind of deciding, well, you know what, this one's a little bit too risky to really pay off. I think I'll let this one go.
Yeah, and that's a great segue there in terms of having patience. Like, hopefully this program keeps going for, they've been doing this for 100 years now in terms of weather sampling with balloons, and these particular devices are going on a decade. So, they do keep having fewer and fewer launch sites. I hope Oakland remains one of the last of them, but they will come to you eventually. So, it's hard when you get started because it's like, oh, I'm going to drive 100 miles to hit the end of a road or run out of light or whatever. And then you learn as you go. Like I've learned a lot of techniques. Like when it's more than 50 miles away, I start working the phone while it's still in the air. And I see who can I get in contact with? Is there a way to figure something out? What's the potential? And at this point, I've definitely got better than a 50-50. I'm going to get this thing when I walk out of the door, or I'm, not gonna bother. But like when Ricky and I scooped 3 that had been down for days and weeks, and I got 3 more the next day, we went after a cluster that were in an area rather than going after every one while it's still live. But the other thing is, like I said, deadly serious that water is my number one tool. And I look forward to having a talk just about that sometime. But aside from property and common sense and things like that, I can't emphasize enough. This is just for fun, and there'll be another one to get. And be prepared, be cautious. Make sure folks know where you're going. When they're not really simple, obvious ones, always bring a friend. And have outs. It's real, like I'm sure what MCOM folks know and are trained in one-on-one, but you get lost in the fun of it, and that will come around and nail you eventually.
Cool. And we've got one more question, then we got to tie it up because we got to move on here. It's been a great presentation so far, but Andy was wondering if you've been able to change the transmitter to 70 centimeter ham band, I'm guessing, to use it as a regular Fox, but as of yet, you haven't been able to do that, right?
Yeah, I have figured out all the things to be able to do that. So in particular, what we're looking at is the STM32F100. So I now know how to twiddle the right bits to reflash these, and I don't have specific Fox code, but what I do have is APRS on 70 centimeters. And so I think that can be modified to then be a Fox. And we'll be able to start experimenting with that And then, yeah, this is the top layer of the board. Here's the back of the cutout section. The GPS and everything is directly under that. And one of the newer hacks I just saw is you can literally hack this corner here off and just wire it to some power, and you have a fully functional standalone GPS receiver. And then these are the accessory extension 2x5 connectors. And so you only need 2 or 3 of those to then be able to reflash the chip. And a group that gave a talk at Pacificon from Southern California has been reflashing these, and students have been launching them. And they now have the ability to attach a mini CCD camera module and transmit still JPEG images over this exact hardware with
cool.
a 400-gram weather balloon.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Bo. And let me see if Steve has any last words.
Nope, the end.